theme music. That would be so hype. So we are officially live. So guys, you can go to, if you're on my page, you can share it out to your people.
For sure.
Let me tell you, Scott's people always come in here like it's a class and family reunion. Let me tell you.
Look, my folks may be asleep on Tuesday.
Right. No, watch what I tell you. Oh man. So come on in to the dancery. So are you guys able to share okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Man.
Very good. Right, we'll get started. We have some good discussion, some good questions, and so hey, we'll start off with some questions, but as comments or questions come in, we'll also stop to address those, and I'll put those on the screen as well. So we'll give it just a couple of minutes. I'm trying to think what would be a good theme song to start adding to the beginning. What would be appropriate? Josh, I know you got something. You keep a ratchet song in your back pocket.
Oh, wait a minute.
Did she lie? Did she lie? Oh,
Did I lie?
No. I don't know if I have anything really current. You know, these
Okay.
new babies is putting out some stuff that ain't, maybe I'm going into my uncle phase of life.
Right.
I
Right. That's true.
think I'm shifting on over.
Right. Well, our Toxic King Future always has something. So,
That album it had great promotion.
right.
That was something nice to say.
Wasn't it?
something very nice to say.
Wasn't
Right.
it? Great promotion.
Right. That's hilarious. So, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So, if you've already joined in, thank you so much for tuning in to Curing the Superman Syndrome. So, I usually do a Curing the Superwoman Syndrome, and it's only right that we talk about curing the Superman syndrome and getting rid of this notion of the Superman or wearing the Superman cape. And so, I had to tap in these three guys because, I joke with them. I told them that they bring, the knowledge, but they also bring the ratchet and the funny and all those things. But they bring the truth and they're passionate about all things mental health, particularly as it pertains to men. And so I'm going to allow you guys to introduce yourselves briefly, tell us your name, what you do, and what you're passionate about in terms of the mental health space. So, Broderick, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So good evening, family. I am Broderick McBride. I am currently serving as a care director at a ministry in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My passion about mental health is essentially me being the intersection between faith and mental health. Oftentimes, mental health practices are not accepted in sacred spaces, especially sacred spaces of religion. And I just believe that I'm called to be a linchpin to bridge the gap between those two entities.
So, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Josh?
Sure. I am Josh Rogers. I am a DEI manager for a nonprofit. And I am a mental health advocate. So I had and we'll probably get into this later, my own personal journey that led me there. And from that particular space, I like to say that I like to advocate from the intersectionality of mental health, self-care, and culture, right? So we understand that as Black people, there are certain, to Broderick's point, right? Jesus is our therapist, so they say. But I believe we can have him and sit on somebody's couch at the same time.
Yeah.
So really breaking down some of those barriers that society has put on us as a people, understanding that we're not a monolith, but as a people collectively, our perspective around it, and just advocating us to go through that journey and discovery for ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.
For sure.
Scott?
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Hayes. I am a licensed clinical social worker, currently working for the VA in their homeless veterans program, working their domiciliary program with homeless vets, attempting to get them clean and sober and ultimately permanently housed. I'm also half of the Love Hayes podcast, which I host with my beautiful wife, Shatay. And we really just talk about healing and wholeness as not destinations, but as lifelong journeys. And the idea that we continue to go through things and we continue to heal and we continue to evolve into the best version of ourselves. And we really don't come at it as experts, but as folks who are just navigating the journey ourselves and sharing.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And so y'all know me. My alias on Facebook is B Speaks. I do have a real name. But I'm CEO of Pearls of Esther, also a licensed clinical social worker. I too work for the VA, and I'm very passionate about holding these types of discussions and hosting these spaces so that we can have these discussions in a safe way and to also be able to provide information. But tonight is not about me, because I'm learning just like you all are learning. So I'm going to ask some questions and I'm going to let these guys talk and give you truth. So the first question that I want to ask is, do you believe that mental health or therapy is still taboo amongst Black men? And if so, why? Why is it still taboo amongst Black men?
Yeah. So I'll take the first jab at it. I actually don't believe that mental health or going to therapy is taboo amongst Black men. And Josh kind of leaned towards it earlier in that Blackness is not monolithic. So even when we talk about Black men, we are as various as our shades of color, right? But I think that specifically with this younger demographic that is Gen X on down, so Gen X really all the way to Alpha, I think that we realized that there was a deficit within conversations amongst those earlier generations, which are typically our fathers and our grandfathers. And for some of us, we've made this sober decision that we are going to talk about the things that we are experiencing. Now, what we do have those conversations, it may vary. Some of us, we have these conversations in the way that we produce our art. Kendrick Lamar just released a phenomenal album here recently. And in one of the particular songs, he specifically talks about his sex trauma and him navigating through what it is that he has experienced. There are a number of us who are entering into podcasting, into gaming, into different modes and forms of education. And in those spaces, we are navigating through the various things that we have encountered and experienced. So no, I don't believe that it is a taboo topic amongst Black men. I do believe that we are having the conversations. However, where we are having those conversations and how healthily we are having those conversations, those are some completely different things.
Yeah, and I want to lean into the where for a second too, because I don't believe that it's taboo. I think it is a matter of GPS and where to have them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's, we have spaces like this, and we kind of talked about it a little bit offline. They're not publicized, or that we're having them on podcasts that may not be as popular, right, as the ones that are happening everywhere, or even in these spaces. I think some Black men are having a hard time finding those spaces to be vulnerable. And then once we find that space, to Broderick's point, what does that even look like? Mm-hmm. Is it really vulnerability that leads to healing and wholeness? Or is it just an exchange of stories, right? And an amplification of what we've been through, right? So I think that we are in a space where we are sharing, right? But it's finding, quote unquote, and I'm using quotes here, the right space to be able to share that cultivates whatever, you know, that most successful journey, whatever that most successful journey is.
So I think in my experience, you know, and working with a much older population, especially of Black men, I do find it to be a little bit still taboo for them. And I think, you know, the fellas alluded to, you know, having like podcast and access kind of things. Many of my older veterans really don't have that type of access, really don't, are not connected to the internet, are really not connected to, they don't know what streaming podcast is and all those types of, you know, where we've tried to establish safe spaces, they don't really have a lot of access. So I'm finding a lot that they really are not having a lot of those conversations. Still finding it very much tough for them to identify. And also like having these ideals that some of them were raised with and a few of us were raised with, and having to break free from those ideas around strength being about how much trauma you can take in and still keep going. And so I see that a lot of times, especially in my veterans that are like frequent flyers in my program, who will do well while they're in the program and then circle back. Their strength is in like being able to be around the things that have been detrimental for them, in the hope that, you know, they can somehow put on their capes and just, if I don't partake, then that means I'm good or I'm tough, right? And they still hold on to some of those ideals around being that an alpha male means that you can take and take and take, and if you can't, then you're a beta male somehow. So still very much taboo, you know, in my line of work.
So there were a few things that were said that triggered some. First of all, this was some awesome feedback. I'm just like, wait, what? Hold on, wait a minute. But there are a few things that triggered some other questions. Josh, you mentioned having difficulty finding the spaces. How do we make it easier for Black men to find those spaces? That's number one. And then number two, Scott, when we talk about the term toxic masculinity, would you say that not wanting, like you said, like, okay, I can be around, you know, I know that I have an issue or I suffered trauma here. Oh, let me just go around this person or this place. And if I can, you know, not send me back into a dark space, and I know that like I'm good, like I've manned up. Would you define that under a toxic masculinity? So I know it's kind of a 2-for-1, but if you guys could speak to either or both of those, that would be great.
Go ahead, Brother Josh.
Yeah, I think in terms of finding the spaces, right, we have to be honest with where we are. So I am a millennial, textbook. So I understand, you know, the evolution of technology, and I get where Gen Z and younger are, right? But I'm also came up in a space where for many Black men, the barbershop was that space. And if we look at barbershops today, like me, I go to a salon suite. He's in his own space. It is appointment driven. So even if someone else comes in the room, they're coming in as I'm leaving, right? So I say that to say, if we understand the relevancy of space, some of those spaces, good, bad, or indifferent, or toxic, however toxic those environments were, have been eliminated by virtue of technology, by virtue of how society and culture has shifted. And to Scott's points, if you're of a certain generation, some of the spaces that are easily accessible via our phones aren't as easily accessible for them, right? And then in terms of younger generations, how much of the noise, right, is louder than what's presented in some of these accessible spaces. So like, I know all three of us have podcasts, right? But then there are the bigger podcasts that's talking about all the pop culture stuff and all the TMZ-esque type of stuff, right? And that kind of noise and chatter can be louder than some of the things, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, than what we're putting out there in the world. So I think there has to be a recognition of how society and culture has shifted what those spaces are. In terms of finding them, the one thing that I have leaned on as it's interesting to call myself a content creator, but as someone who creates content, right? Kev on Stage said that I've never really been viral. I've always been consistent. And it was his consistency that brought him a certain level of exposure, right? So I think that regardless of how society continues to shift, nothing ever beats the beauty of consistency. So having these type of conversations, making sure that platforms are available, spaces are created, right? And whatever reaches the demographic that you are called or targeting, right? I think the consistency in those spaces allows, right, these conversations to be had and be more easily accessible.
You know, as it relates to toxic masculinity, not masculinity, I think that I'm starting to have like a very difficult relationship with like popular terminology that people tend to grab a hold of and just kind of throw around. And I think again, I'm bringing it back to the population that I work with, and a lot of their traumas. They were taught that they are normal, and so when something is normal for you, and someone comes and calls it toxic masculinity, or they call you this thing and they call you that thing, when it's normal for you, you don't really know to call it trauma. And if I don't know that something is wrong, then how can I right it? You know what I'm saying? And so I think that we have to, and I make it a point with the folks that I work with, and even with some of my friends sometimes, to not even use the word trauma or not use the word toxic masculinity. Try not to use some of those terms. I will talk to my veterans and call it like some of your stuck places, some of the things that you haven't been able to get over. I think like normalizing like regular terminology and helping people to understand that this is part of a human existence, and you are not some superhero who's experienced something that everyone else isn't going through. I think that's important. And what I'm finding most applicable in my practice is just that when you give people their humanity back, you give them permission to feel whatever it is that they feel, and to understand that before I try to tell you what you should be as a man, or before I try to tell you that you're not being enough as a man, I want to humanize you first and let you know that you're a human being who's experiencing just what other human beings are experiencing.
Broderick, did you want to add anything or?
No, the brothers, they hit the nail on the head, spot on. Yeah.
That was, awesome stuff. Just as a quick pause here, make sure that you can share it out on your page. I realized that it was saying that it was for some reason going only to my friends list. So just make sure that you're able to share it, reshare it out on your page. So I made it public. So if you're in the comments, come on in, ask questions. So this is some good stuff. I like what you said, Scott, about humanizing first. And then then we can talk about what you believe about being a man. And also, Josh, you're sharing about how we have all of these avenues, but how are we finding them when so many of the podcasts and the spaces are being overshadowed by the Kardashians and pop culture on the podcast, Yeah. So we have to, like you said, you mentioned Kevin on Stage and just being consistent with creating these spaces, and hopefully we can start to have more and more of these types of conversations for sure. So let's go to our next question here. So this is a kind of heavy question. Is trauma or stuck places, as Scott said, are stuck places discussed in the male group chats? And if so, how are y'all showing up for each other? And if you see me look at my phone, I'm listening. I'm just making sure that I'm sharing this out. So what's going down in the DMs, fellas? Like, are y'all talking about, the game, the NBA finals? Or are y'all really doing some serious talking about, hey, bro, like, how are you really doing? So talk to me. What's going on?
Well, I have been sworn to secrecy. No, so for me, I am a part of several different text groups or group chats. Not all the time are we having these heavy, hard-hitting dialogues. And checking in with each other can be something as simple as, hey, bro, you good? Hey, fam, you been quiet for a minute? hey, I know last week we talked through such and such and such and such. I'm just following up with you, man. Are you straight? Like, that's a form of self-care for the brothers, just to simply just hit your boy up and say, hey, I'm just checking on you. Are you good? But as far as like the conversations that I had within those spaces, yes, for many of us, we are having those heavy hitting, hard conversations. And it's not necessarily for the sake of somebody reframing or redirecting what it is that we are experiencing or what it is that we are sharing, but it's simply being able to identify that I'm under a certain type of pressure and I have to press the pressure release button, because if I don't, I'm going to explode. I'm going to explode in my home. I'm going to explode with my children. I'm going to explode in my job, or I'm literally going to implode. For the sake of avoiding implosion, for the sake of avoiding explosion, or even levels of self-sabotage, yes, we are having those conversations. And oftentimes it's for the better. Sometimes it's not, because you do need somebody to help you to walk along your journey of whatever it is that you're facing. But I think that for many of us, we may lack the vocabulary that's needed. Sometimes we don't know what to say in moments. So even in sharing, even with people that we are comfortable with, sometimes we are met with silence. And it's nothing more than, dang, bro, it's messed up, man. Whatever you need, fam, we here. Sometimes I don't know what I need. Right. But, you know, being able to even refer brothers to mental health workers, licensed mental health workers, that's also a thing as well within the threads. Helping us with moments of mindfulness, whether if it's journaling. Adrian Davis has a phenomenal journal out called the Grown Ass Man Journal. And there are writing prompts in this journal that literally helps you to navigate through hard nuances that may be placating within the mind. So yes, the conversation is being had. Sometimes we have somebody redirecting us and helping us to reframe. Sometimes we don't, but it is happening.
Yeah, I would agree in my group chats as well. I know in my, what I would call my inner circle, we actually have a code word, and we'll say, we'll throw out the tree emoji because that's the trust tree. And when it hits it, we already know what's up. We're like, all right, everybody buckle up, sit down, because somebody's about to drop something, right? And it's in that moment where, to your point, the conversation about the finals, the conversations about all the, you know, miscellaneous things are really put on pause, because we got to hear this brother's heart. And from there, I can give a personal testament. So in 2020, I got laid off at the top of the pandemic. And what I learned in my therapy journey, that my self-worth was attached to my work. So when I lost my job, I didn't find myself valuable anymore. Not to my family, not to my wife. I literally sat in that woman's lap and cried because I knew I had failed her, because I could not do it, right? And it was in that moment I saw my friends step up for me, my male friends step up for me in ways I had never seen them before. It was random phone calls. It was forcing the FaceTime. And I got a friend who he hates FaceTime, right? But forcing the FaceTimes, just to be like, Josh, I need to look you in your face, right? I need to see where you are. And if I'm laying in the bed, like, nigga, get out that bed, right? So like those kind of checkpoints. And I'm usually the one checking other people. I'm like, who are you talking to? Right. But having them in that space. And then we've had so on my podcast, we had a conversation about mental health one time, and my podcast co-host is a part of that group. He revealed to me that, hey, you know, me and this other friend, we would call each other, be like, have you checked on Josh? No. Okay, one of us needs to do it, right? So understanding that those spaces, because I'm usually that other person saying, have you checked on this person? Have you checked on that person? So they're definitely happening. To Broderick's point, that sometimes we don't know what to say, or sometimes with, you know, the awkward or the like not knowing what to say, it turns into a joke, because we don't know what else to give. And not a joke about their situation, but we throw a joke out there, right, to kind of lighten it up, because we don't have anything else. But always bringing it back home to be like, but in all seriousness, bro, here's what I would do, or here's what some next steps, or here's some whatever. Here's what I did. I've recommended people to my therapist. I've recommended to the site, right, that I found my therapist on. I've recommended some other tools. I've sent out podcasts that I trust and other voices that I've trust. To Broderick's point, mentioning the journal, right? So all these different type of resources, if I have them, you can have them. There's a book that I've been reading. Like, all that kind of stuff goes into the group chat. Now, what they do with it is something else. But I also know in a week or so, I'm gonna be like, hey, bro, how your heart? Or, hey, bro, you said you're going to therapy. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't see them tools, bro. Right? Because there's a disconnect somewhere. And because we have relationship, I'm ready for you to cuss at me because you're offended and you got caught, right? But because I love you, I want to see you. Now, I'm not gonna press you to the point to where we go to blows and we're, all this other kind of stuff. But I want to be able to at least provide that space, right? So that you feel comfortable at least coming here if you're not going there, right? So we've created that space for us to be vulnerable and transparent and really bear it all to each other.
And, very much similar for me. I just believe in curating safe spaces, especially for my brothers. You know, I believe that I believe that everybody needs safe spaces. I believe that men in particular need safe spaces, and men need community. So many of us were raised to believe that our independence is tied into who we are as men. Our ability to be able to do it all is tied into our manhood that defines us. And I've just learned that men need community. And so I try to curate safe spaces. So, in our group chats, the difficult conversations they're coming. Now, them Negroes might have a different chat without me in it, but they know if I'm up in there, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to check on you and see what's going on. But I get a whole bunch of calls individually sometimes from those friends that are in those groups and say, hey, man, who did you say your therapist was again? Like, couldn't you recommend somebody for this that's going on in my life? Do you know somebody who works with kids? Can somebody see, me and my wife or me and my family? Can we do those types of things? So even if a part of the conversation, if they don't feel safe to have it in that chat, then there's space. I'm always going to be saving space for my guys to be able to have those conversations. So definitely I will say that, sometimes we are taught to go in our caves and just hide things from the world. And so some of our healing, we feel like has to happen in secret too. So even before we came on, we were kind of talking about, not seeing a lot of this kind of stuff, kind of spread across the internet and that kind of thing. But so many men, depending on what generation they're from, they want to do their healing in private. And I think that is generational. I'm hoping it's something that we can break through, but it comes with that idea that there has to be secrecy. And when we are not healed and when we don't deal with our trauma, we go in our caves and we play with our toys, whatever they may be for us. They may be pornography, they may be alcohol, they may be drugs, it may be being in women's DMs, it may be any of those things. But when you don't heal your trauma, it is going to show up, and it will show up in a way, for most of us, in a way that we revert to children and we find whatever it is to pacify that thing. And so I want to make sure that we are having some grace, but also saving some space for men who are ready to have some of those conversations, and for those who aren't as well. So every man needs somebody who knows where the bodies are buried. And my boys know what my stuff is. And they know if I start acting a certain way, if I start talking crazy, and it hit me on the side and be like, hey, but that don't even sound like you. Like, you the one in the group that got sense. All right. So let's talk about what's going on. But always, community, we need it.
Ooh, brothers, this has been good stuff. You see, I had to grab my pen and start writing some stuff down. Let's talk about, and thank you all for your transparency and for being willing to share how you have been able to revert to your safe spaces and be able to share about what you were experiencing at that time and get the support that you need. Broderick, you hit on something. You said sometimes it's met with silence when we share. And as a therapist, sometimes when I'm in sessions and if my clients say something and it's met with silence, then they get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Because people are not, I don't think we're comfortable with silence. And the reason why I do it is just, and usually they can kind of hear what they said without me having to be like, well, did you hear what you know? But sometimes we're not comfortable with silence. So for you guys, when you share something in the group chat or with a family member or a friend or whomever, a struggle, and it's met with silence, or it was met with silence when you have shared something, what does that communicate to you if it's met with silence or if it's met with a joke to laugh it off? What does that tell you about your pain or about whether or not you're safe sharing about the challenges that you may be having or something that you may be struggling with?
It literally boils down to the end of the day, what I like to call relationship equity, because we are in community with each other. Your silence isn't creating a narrative in my mind that translates to violence or that translates to isolation or that translates to what I said does not have value. Even if you crack a joke, to kind of like break up the monotony of the moment, because of relationship equity, because you are my boy, because you are part of my inner circle, my holies of holies. I don't communicate that within my mind, translate that in my mind as something negative or adverse. So that's one part. The other part to it is, although what I said may have been met by silence, it was not met by your absence. And there is a such thing as divine presence. I use it quite often when I go do hospital visits or when I'm sitting with people in some very low valley in the shadow of death type moments, right? I don't necessarily have words to give you, but the fact that I am here with you in this low place, the value of presence does way much more than what my words could ever do. So although we may be met with silence, although we may be met with a joke, the fact that you're still here, that says a lot. That says far much more than what your words could ever do. Now, the other part of that is, in the moment, I may be met with silence. In the moment, I may be met with a joke. But on the back end, in your sobriety, once you've too also chewed through what I just said, now we're able to kind of dialogue and navigate through the moment together. So I have your presence, but on the back end of your silence, now we're able to come back through and chew through what it was that I just shared and what it was that I just gave.
Yeah, so for me, I don't really I don't think any of my friends really accept silence. We will let it be for the moment, but there is going to be some arrangements made for us to get together in person. And when there are difficult topics thrown out there, I think my crew just kind of knows that, okay, it's time for some face to face. And I may tell my wife that, I'm going out with the boys to have drinks. And we even do. I might get in trouble for sharing this. We do what we call fuck it Fridays sometimes, where we all take off work and we go on our fishing trip, and we may not pick up a fishing pole. It is a time for us to commune together, to not be at work, and to just kind of lay everything out on the table and talk about what's going on in all of our lives. And we're in the middle of the lake somewhere, and whatever issues come out there, they are left there when we leave. And that is safe space for us. And so when somebody drops something heavy, it may be time for some FaceTime. It's not something that I want to say to you sometimes in a public forum, even amongst the rest of the group. I may need to call individually and check on you. And I think we are more apt to do those check-ins, or for one of us to suggest that we have a F It Friday, or have a Friday evening where we get together and we go have drinks and we just kind of chop it up and talk through whatever may be going on with the person. And those gentlemen have just, been my friends for 15, 20 years. They've seen me through marriage and divorce and another marriage and all of those things. And so they know those things about me, and they know when it's time to get it together.
If I can be half spiritual for a second, when Broderick was talking about silence and the relationship equity, it really reminded me of when right before Jesus' crucifixion, Pilate asked him, "Who are you?" And he wouldn't respond. And what that made me think about is that his silence never negated who he was and the purpose that he served for other people. Right. So I think when we are in real relationship with people who are there for us, their silence does not dismiss their purpose in our lives. Right. So they may not have the words, or it may not even be an opportune moment for them to speak. But because I know who you are, right, I don't hold that against you because I still trust who you are for me. Right. So to Broderick's point, your presence is what I need. Understand, I came to you because I know who you are. Right. And that's why I'm here. Not because I need a deep theological answer. I need a big fluffy something. Maybe I just need the space to put it out there. Because oftentimes I think I'm not talking about us, people make the mistake of trying to provide answers that we just really do not have. And my grandma has always told me, son, you don't know what you don't know. And we can't give people things that we do not know. So as much as I am a mental health advocate, right, I know that I don't sit in the seat of a licensed clinical anything, right? So once my capacity has been met, right, it is time for me to refer all the way out. And sometimes I really ain't got nothing for you, but dang, bro. So how did that really make you feel? Like I'm asking more questions, so I'm like, what did my therapist ask me? I'm asking more questions because I want you to get it out, right? Because I don't have anything else. And to your point, be in a professional setting, I've been in those settings. Sometimes your clients will talk themselves to an answer. You know what I'm saying? So I let them talk and once they're done, be like, all right, bet. So are we good for now? Are you at least more calm? Or are you at least more, and then I'm just checking their temperature. Because at that point, we want to transition to some next steps that is beyond this group. But the silence is not necessarily, if you're taking these to new spaces, then that silence may be something like, whoa, wait a minute, what did I do? But if these are real trusted communities, then that silence also communicates because it's a trusted space. It's a trusted vessel.
And then for me, being a licensed clinical social worker, I have to know when to turn that off, especially in those safe spaces, right? Because my friends don't necessarily need reflective listening, which is going to be a skill that I'm going to use with my veterans. If I can't meet them with silence, they're going to ask if I heard them, or wonder if I care and those types of things. But when you have curated a safe space, where there is relationship, like Broderick alluded to, they don't need me to say what I heard you say was, those type of them Negroes getting ready to cuss me out if I do that, because they'd be like, look, don't social work me. One of my boys is always gonna say, don't psychologize me in here, bruh. Don't do it. And so they want to know that this is a space where they are talking to Scott. And if I need to refer, and I'm gonna need to refer, there is no therapeutic advice that I can give to a person that I'm in relationship with, because I can't be impartial. You can't be impartial when you're in relationship with with a person. So you have to refer out anyway. So I can't give you any therapeutic advice that's going to do you no good and not end up ruining our relationship. So I have to care enough to be like, hey, bro, I can't answer that for you. I can refer you to somebody who may be able to help you, though.
These are all awesome points. I hope you guys can see the comments here, because can y'all see the comments? No, you can't.
No, we can't.
Okay. Oh no. Okay. Well, first of all, Shatay is going crazy in the comments. I told y'all that Scott's people gonna show up. Hey, Shatay. That's Miss Hayes. Let's see. We've got Ty says that's good. So, I mean, you guys are getting some really good feedback here. I apologize. I thought that you could see. Did we lose Broderick? I thought that you could see the comments. So I'm just going to scroll down real quick so that you can see. We'll have to talk about that, Dr. Scott Hayes. All right. So hopefully we can get Broderick back here momentarily. So true, Josh. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. So this has been such an eye-opening conversation for sure. And I feel like these are things that are probably discussed in a lot of other spaces, but we just don't see them. Like we kind of said at the beginning, we don't see a lot of this going on. And so I want to go to the next question because again, I'm just listening. I'm taking it all in. So I'm just going through the questions and I'm listening to everything that y'all have to say. So what do you feel like the proverbial Superman ideal comes from? Is that something that you feel like is mostly something that comes from childhood, or where does that come from? And is it more prominent amongst Black men?
I feel like for me, it is definitely learned behavior. I got mine from my daddy. And when I talk to other Black men, most of us, were raised. When you see a little boy fall down when they learn how to walk, somebody tells them to get up, stop crying. You see a little girl fall down, someone picks them up and they picks her up and they coddle her and they tell her it's going to be okay. And we start teaching men from that very young age that it's not okay for them to feel what they feel. That if you're in pain, then you don't talk about it. You don't cry. Dry them tears up, boy. Those types of things. And that in itself starts from a very young age, telling men to put on their capes, that you're invincible. We learn that our value as husbands should be in what we can provide, if we can take care of. As Uncle Scott, can you come get me? I'm stuck on 20. I got a flat tire. We start to find our value in those things, and it says, put on your cape and come save me. And if you're able to do that, then you're a great man. And I don't want to be celebrated in my death as a great man for everything that I did for everyone else, and none of the things that I was able to do for myself to promote self-care amongst men, to help other men unlearn that their value is not in what they can do for other folks.
I would agree 100%. I was just going to say that I think for me, it was learned behavior. So my dad is who I would consider my superhero. But I also saw that man work 3 jobs on 3 different shifts, and not because he had to, but it's because he had a specific financial goal. There was a specific lifestyle he wanted to provide for his family that my mama didn't pressure him to do, that we weren't like, oh, Dad, we need all these different types of things. He was like, I need to do this. I need to be able to provide this and provide that. And in so many ways, I think the busyness that I had created in my life modeled that, because I saw how consistent he was as a husband and a father and a friend. And I'm like, and if I'm not in multiple lanes, right, not by virtue of, just my skill and ability or desire, but by virtue of saying, this is what I need to do to provide, what I need to do to show up, then there's a piece of me that says I'm not successful or I'm not valuable. And when I got laid off, as I alluded to earlier, it destroyed everything, because it stripped me from finding worth in my work. I had no work. So it's definitely a learned behavior. And to Scott's point, I can't be 100% to Josh if I am trying to be everything to everybody else. And B, you asked me for a ratchet song, but the 3 6 and the Mafia have a song that says, don't save her. She don't want to be saved. And and there's actually some mistruth in there, because they do want to be saved, but I think the value in flipping that is that they don't always need to be saved. Sometimes some of these people are pulling on you because they understand that their level of contentment is rested in your availability. And as soon as you can release that availability, you force them to be content without you and to grow up and mature. Oftentimes, people's ability to mature and grow up is because we won't allow ourselves the space to let them do that. And we're killing ourselves in the process, coddling and feeding, right? And then going back to that little boy versus little girl example, my wife is a social worker. So we have a very much open communication. You know, my son would always say, Dad, I didn't like how you said that to me. I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry. How would you want me to say that to you? Because you're still wrong. So how do I need to say these things to you? But we make sure this is a space for them to be open. But to that same point, right, we have these differences of how we raise young boys and young girls. And then when we get older, there's this big conversation about these emotionally insensitive and emotionally unavailable men, right? So little boy don't cry. And then in another space, not in all space, in another space, a grown somebody's telling them, why are you being so sensitive? Why are you being such a punk? Right? What do you want me to do? Where am I supposed to be? So I'm putting on this cape, not so much as a superhero, but almost as a shield to protect me from all these conflicting messages that's really messing up my psyche and my emotions. And I don't know how to navigate. So I'm going to be Nevadius B. I'm going to be Future. I'm going to be Toxic. I'm going to be some of these other things because this is the only way I know how to express it. Right. So I think there's great conflict, right? Starting from a very learned age in how we deal with trauma and how we, or are stuck, or where we get stuck. I think that's a great word. I think it starts very early of how society and our family and our traditions, right, kind of educate us to be these ways.
Yeah. And we learn, and I'm sorry to jump in, Broderick. We learn early in our spiritual teaching as well. You have to endure hardness as a good soldier, right? We give little boys and men these messages over and over again. And then you get in relationship and be like, oh my God, why he so stoic? Why you won't talk about it? And I'm over here enduring hardness as a good soldier. That's what you told me to do, ain't it?
Yep.
Right. So
we like, that ain't what we want, fam.
Right. That ain't it, right? When it doesn't serve you. But back to how people learn to deal with us. We do folks a disservice when we don't allow them to show up as their true and authentic selves. And sometimes we don't do that under the guise of, I need to save you. I need to be the one to take care of you. Nobody else is going to do it. But then people will start to budget for you, right? I know Uncle Scott going to do it. I know Uncle Brad going to take care of it. I'm going to go buy this purse because Brad got me, right? Josh gonna take care of it. I know I can lean on him, or I'm gonna go and do this wild thing, and I'm gonna call and I'm gonna dump on this person who is the counselor, who is the counselor of the group, and then I'm gonna go out here and have my fun, and I'm coming to dump on you. But there is my humanity, and there's the things that I need, right? And if I'm always saving you, then who pours into me? Right? Nobody does that for me. So I gave away my cape. I took that thing to Goodwill. I don't have no time for it because it has not served me. One of the things that I had to contend with when I was getting a divorce was wondering why I was 11 years into the totality of a relationship, and I was not able to tell the therapist at that time why this person wouldn't do what I wanted her to do. And it was because I thought that somehow by osmosis, she was going to absorb how to treat me well because I treated her well and I treated her the way that I wanted to be treated. But I never said for myself how I needed to be treated, what I wanted in order to show up in that relationship. I learned what I thought was the game from the men around me. I learned how to be a chameleon. You like the movies, we're going to the movies. You like flowers, I'm going to get flowers, and nothing about what it is that I needed to be in relationship. And then I showed up and said what I needed. And this person was like, boy, who is you? I don't know you and I don't want to do that. And so then I had to take my responsibility for what I brought to that space and not asking for anything for all of that time, but secretly being mad about what I wasn't getting.
Wow. So
we have to earn that we have to, take responsibility for that part of it too. Closed mouths don't get fed. And if you're a superhero and you jump in and you just save folk, then you get to be a superhero. You don't see Superman on vacation. He's saving folk. So we're not that.
And you don't see Superman get what he desired at the end of the day. Lois Lane played him the entire time. Even as we were having the conversation about the cape, what immediately came to mind for me is that some people have no choice but to take the cape because nobody else will come and save the day for them. So eventually you have to step into the role of becoming your own superhero. And because you had to do it for yourself, you begin to identify yourself as the superhero. So you become the counselor in everybody's life. You become the answer wherever you are, because you've planted your identity in that because you had to do it for yourself. So that's also another area as well where the proverbial Superman cape comes from. And because you have bound yourself to the identity of, I had to go get it out the mud. So I'm going to keep getting it out the mud. I'm not going to depend on nobody. I'm not going to ask nobody for nothing. I'm not going to ask nobody for nothing. So I don't owe nobody nothing. Yeah, that kills a lot of us. And essentially it communicates pride. Because even God receives. So if we never permit ourselves to receive just as much as we give, that's pride. And it is a reflection of poor character. Yeah.
Dove, listen, when I wave my hands like this, that's the church wave. I don't even have a rag or nothing to throw. I just have to, I guess I wave the flag, right? So these are definitely some gems. Ty said, ouch. Yes, that definitely cut a little bit, but it was a good cut. It was good. So I feel like there's a whole nother question that I wanted to ask about the once you throw down the cape. And I know we're kind of winding down on time here, but I want to make sure we at least cover this question. How do men cope with grief? And I know that there's no like, oh, they cope in these 3 ways, but there may be some general things that you've seen either in a therapeutic setting, Josh, in your circle, Broderick, whether it's in the pastoral care setting or in the ministry setting or just in your circle, Scott in the clinical setting. How do men deal with grief? Because we've had a lot of grief over these last 2 years, and we're still reeling from some of the losses we've had. So what are your thoughts on how men generally cope with when they're grieving?
My perspective, how do men deal with grief? Hell, the best we can. There is something to be said for the work, and I think it's some dynamic work that still has to be done with men around grief and loss, not of people, but of things too. And I always give this example when I start my group with my men. When I was a little boy, I used to have one of those Tonka trucks, big yellow Tonka truck, the big metal. You could pick up rocks and move from one side of the yard to the other. You do whatever you want to with that Tonka truck. That thing was indestructible. One day, I left it out in the yard. My daddy backed over it and crushed it. And I was crying, and my daddy picked me up, put my behind in the front yard, and he said, if you had not been irresponsible with what I gave you, then you wouldn't have lost it. So just know that it's your fault that you lost. And what I want us to be able to do as men is to be able to grieve the loss even when it's our fault, right? We still get to grieve even when it's our fault. We are so used to being able to take our punishment when we lose, when we're responsible for something, when something has gone wrong, that we often don't know how to do anything but be masters of like taking a whooping. And we get so immune to like getting the whooping. Like, I'd rather just take my consequence, and I don't want to talk through what it is that I lost. So I end up losing again. I just try to get more creative and better able to resist the whooping rather than processing through and seeing how I can be more careful with what it is that I have. And I want us to learn how to grieve the loss of things, of people, of all of those things, of relationship appropriately. So we can understand that we don't always have to be losing. We don't have to be masters of loss. We can grieve what it is and do something different.
I love that, because also I think one thing that I've learned too is that in addition to that, sometimes we rush for the upgrade, or what we consider to be the upgrade, right? Oh my God, I lost this job, bet, boom, 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 let's find something better. So this relationship didn't work out. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna do that. Where we never sometimes take that time to stop and process what happened, to process maybe even how we contributed to it, to process all the things we enjoyed, to process the lessons. I mean, all of these things, right? And to really grieve it, right? And to understand that this was a highlight in my life. This was something that I enjoyed. This is something that was vital to my existence, and it is no longer here. Like even to Scott's Tonka truck example, right? As a little boy, that was his truck. Right. So to lose it, right, that's something that I no longer have to play with. You know, my daily activities have, like, as a little boy, your life has literally shifted, right? It has literally changed. And if we take that childlike example to our life and see how when we lose something or someone, there is a void in that space, and it's not necessary to immediately try to fill that, because that doesn't always provide the healing and wholeness that we think it is, because that replacement may be, you know, using that buzzword toxic, it may not be the best fit. We're just ready, and especially for those who are hyper productive, we're ready to move on to the next thing, because if I have it there, I won't feel that as much, right? All the while, it's really just masking the fact that you never really dealt with what is no longer there. So like for me, when I got laid off, I immediately went into just like super entrepreneurial mode, never had that title on myself, and was burning myself out trying to make some t-shirts and all this other kind of foolishness about a t-shirt press. And I'm like, Josh, what the hell are you doing? Right. But it's because I'm like, I got to do something. I can't just sit here. I got to do something. But I did not process the fact that I got laid off from a job that was not my fault. Right. I got, you know, I no longer have this income from my family. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Am I going to get this little unemployment? You know, my mind went to this place of feeling that void versus feeling FEE, right? Feeling the emotion of the loss. And when I finally did it, I crashed and I was done for weeks. I mean, deep depression for weeks, because I did not grieve. I didn't start that grieving process. And I think all of you would probably agree that there's no right or wrong way per se to grieve, right? Everybody's going to go through that process differently, but I didn't give myself the chance to do that, to explore the range of what that possibly meant for my betterment. And it was actually to my detriment, you know, that I had that down, that super, super low moment. So all of that to say, I think to Scott's point, yes, but also sometimes we move on way too fast and we don't give ourselves space to feel because we want to feel, FILL.
As I was listening to both Scott and Josh talk, immediately what came to mind was a phrase that I oftentimes use in grief coaching moments with parishioners, is that the only way that we manage grief is to literally go through grief. Mm-hmm. And so taking off the track shoes, and even like thinking about the question that you posed, B, I started looking at my own self and how I have handled grief in the past. And immediately, he's a runner, he's a track star. That immediately came to mind. But one of my immediate go-tos is immediate silence. I mean, like deafening silence. A few years ago, I went through a horrible church split. I was employed by this ministry. I had relationships in this ministry. I did life with those in this ministry. And all of a sudden, the bottom just fell out of it. And in the bottom falling out, you know, you have a lot of questions. You have questions that are being posed to you as a leader, and you don't know how to respond to them because you want to maintain and keep respect and keep names clean. And then there's this blend of toxic loyalty that's there. And there's a whole lot of nuances. And then there's the chatter that you hear, or the stories that are being created, and you want to stand up and take up for yourself. And it's like, immediately my response was silence, deafening silence. Although I wasn't necessarily commuting anything, my mind was literally all over the place. And the pain of that experience, I'm still navigating through. Even what does that look like? Now being in a fresh, new ecumenical space, being in a different city, being in a different community, there are still nuances that are just common denominators and common factors within ecumenical spaces that are to this day triggers for me. So I had to staff my reality with coping skills, healthy coping skills, right? I had to find therapists who are able to navigate me through moments, allow my community into moments, and being able to have those hard conversations. So, yeah, running, silence, but then also on the flip, learning healthy coping skills to navigate through the journey of grief. And Scott said something at the very beginning about how he and his wife podcast, it deals with the nuance of healing, how healing is a journey and not necessarily a destination. And that's something that you discover in grief. You can be over one space in a grieving moment over a thing, and then you'll hear a song, you'll have a smell, you'll, see Facebook memories, right? Facebook memories just wear folk out. And it's like, it's people in my Facebook memories. I can't even text you no more. I can't even call you no more. I'm blocked. Like, so there's a lot that's in that. And even, being able to find and hold healthy coping skills. Yeah.
Jesus, let me tell you, those Facebook memories, they need to do away with that. Like, what purpose does that serve other than reactivate a grief cycle?
They've got to get rid of those.
They got to. They have got to. Because it's like you said, Broderick, like, we'll talk no more. So what? And then there you go. You're like you said, you're being triggered, and your stuff you might have thought that you processed, now you're having to work through it.
It's coming up.
It's coming up. So, I like what you all have said about just this common theme of just there not being any proper way to do it. It sounds like you all have had your own way of working through it, recognizing that you can't run from grief, because it will grief, its track shoes are better than yours, and it will run you down. You hear me? It's gonna always come come see what it's hitting for every time. So I like that you all have talked about how you've been able to recognize a childhood experience or just even an adult experience that you eventually just succumbed to it and went through the process. That was the thing. You might have run at first, but you eventually were able to trust the process. So good deal. Well, we're running low on time here. We do have a question. Someone asked, and if one of you guys want to take this one, do we need to grieve everything? That was from Michelle Cole. Do we need to grieve everything?
I think that's very much individualized. And I think I would start with giving yourself permission to not need permission to grieve whatever it is that you've lost. If it's a loss for you, then you go through your grieving process with. No one else gets to determine what is worth grieving for you. And so many times people will tell us, will minimize us, and will take the thing from us that we are really dealing with. And I think that contributes to robbing us of our humanity. If something is important to me and I have lost it and I am grieving, I am just grieving. We have to find a way to be able to walk in our truth and just call a thing and say that I'm dealing with this thing and I need some time with it. I lost that. It was my fault or it was not my fault, and I'm still grieving it. The person was trifling, and maybe it's best that they ain't in my space no more, but I'm still grieving it. I agree to get. That's why Facebook memories kick my ass. Because sometimes maybe the person wasn't no good for me, right? But that Facebook memory, that probably was a part of that highlight reel where it reminds you that there were some good times, right? And I can still grieve that thing, even if they was trifling. But that wasn't the totality of their humanity either. So you don't get to rob me of mine because that relationship is no longer. It is still a part of my process. So nobody gets to tell you what to grieve and when to grieve.
Good stuff. Last question. How can women show up? And wait a minute. Now, I haven't even got the question now, and Scott is already laughing. Scott, can I get the question out? Can I please? Yes. Okay. Why is he already laughing, y'all?
You got it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Because look, I already know. I have to ask this though, because we are always wondering how we can show up. And it's not just in the context of a romantic relationship. It can be for my male friend, my uncle, my father, my brother, nephew, my cousin, my coworker, whomever. How can we show up when we know that a man in our life, in whatever capacity that we care about, is struggling with their mental health? And I can say this: I've been in a situation before where someone was venting to me, and I'm a fixer. So if you come to me, Broderick, we've worked together on projects. So in my when we've worked together and built, things out business wise, Broderick can call me, Brenda, you got a quick second? Boom, 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 boom. So what you got? And I can say, Broderick, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Boom, our conversation over. It's fixed. So in this context, this person was venting, and I listened, and I said, well, and next time do X, Y, Z. And it was over for me because I'm like, that was an easy fix. Let's move on. And it came up later on that, well, Brandy, when I was venting to you, I really just wanted to vent. I didn't want you to fix that for me. I really felt safe enough to vent about my feelings about this. And you kind of cut me off and fixed it. And that wasn't really what I needed. So how can we show up in any context with our male counterparts, right? When we know that you're struggling, we know that you lost the job, we know that your ego or your self-esteem is taking a hit, we know that you're grieving. How do we support you?
I think you just answered it. You have to hear the ask. There have been, with me and my wife, she knows me. And she'll come to me in the past and be like, hey, what's wrong? I'll be like, I'm good. And I'm probably not. But in the moment, I'm good. It's just, I don't really want to talk about this now. And she would keep pressuring and pressuring and pressuring. And very early in our marriage, I would keep telling them, if you keep asking me what's wrong with me, now you're going to become the problem. Because now you're what's wrong with me, right? Because I'm annoyed. But as we've navigated our relationship, what she's learned is like, all right, I understand this. Let's give him the space. I come back. And I'm like, all right, this is what happened at work, right? So I think it's really depending on the type of relationship, you may be able to really discern the space that man is in, and know that he's not looking to be fixed. He's not looking to have his mom in that situation. He's not looking to have, the therapist, if you happen to be that, or anything like that. Sometimes they just want to hear, or, right, I think most men, again, not trying to be a monolith, but are pretty matter of fact. If we're coming for advice, we'll be like, let me get your thoughts on this, right? It'll be phrased in that way versus, I had a really bad day. This is what happened. Now those are two different conversations, right? So I think it's really active listening, and then once you get him in that vulnerable space, it is also going back to that conversation about childhood, not demeaning that vulnerability or that transparency, or be like, it ain't even that deep. Why are you doing all that? Well, it was that deep, right? So now, right, he no longer feels safe. Now he no longer wants to be vulnerable with you because, for some men, you've just checked his manhood. His ego is now rising. His pride is now rising because you're saying he's responding in a way that's not manly because you thought he did too much or whatever it is, right? So I think it's honoring that space and honoring that transparency as a man, but also human to human. You see what I'm saying? And that same level of respect that you would want, give it to him, understanding how he presents it. That's my perspective. The brothers may have something different.
Josh hit it nail on the head. Immediately my mind, there is a song by Alex Isley when she opens up the song with "Take Up Some Space, You're Too Far Away." It's literally, as a woman, taking up space in space. And it can be platonic space, it can be intimate romantic space, but simply just taking up space. And taking up space, if you know him enough to take up space, then you're able to discern what it is that he may need in that moment. If he's not able to verbalize it, but 9 times out of 10, and again, not to be a monolith, brothers will say, I have that type of relationship with my wife, but also with my female friends as well. Hey, such and such and such and such and such is going on. And their immediate question now, because they know me, is, all right, are we dialoguing or are you asking for advice? And that gives me the ground to say, yeah, we just dialoguing. And we dialogue and be like, oh, okay. And we move on. So yeah, you basically answered the question for yourself.
Yeah, I believe it was the great prophetess Cardi B who said, "Be careful with me."
Belcalis.
Be careful with me. And know what you're doing. Okay. So if you want to know how you can support men, be careful with us. All right. Just know at baseline, we are striving to be better. Right. And if you can give me some space and give me some grace to become, it'll be all right. You know, we really need that. It is about active listening. It is about communicating with care and concern, about letting me know that at baseline you on my team, and that even if you're not ready to show up in this space at this moment that I'm saving for you, I'm not going to abandon that space. It's going to be there for you when you're ready. And so many of us have the different parts of our lives that we still have to work through, those different stuck places that we have to work through. To know that there is a space that is safe for us to communicate those things when we're ready to show up there is very much important. So yeah, I think that book was left out of the Bible, the book of Cardi B. Be careful with me.
I love it. You see, Josh was ready to jump on that ratchet moment, right? He called out her government name.
We love Belcalis.
I tried to tell y'all, like, Roderick got a little bit of it in him too, but he's trying to be calm tonight. So
this ain't the let out. This ain't the let out.
Listen, this ain't the let out. Y'all have to listen to the let out. It is all types of hilarious. But Michelle said it's hard to know when you're asking for advice or when you want to vent. Well, they have definitely shared ways to be able to differentiate the two. Michelle said that it was left out of the Bible. Yeah, so y'all are heathens. No, I'm kidding. Jessica said it needs to be in there. So who we have to petition to have it added, I guess. So guys, we could go on and on and on and on. I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you all have families and obligations. Tell the people where they can follow you, keep up with everything, because all of y'all got stuff going on. So, and all of y'all are podcast hosts. Josh with the Jigsaw, Scott with the Love Haze, and Broderick with the Let Out. So let the people know how they can follow you and keep up with everything you got going on. We'll start with you, Josh.
Sure. So you can follow me on all platforms at I am Josh Rogers, just like it is on the screen. You can follow and listen to the podcast at the Jigsaw Podcast on Instagram. We're available on every platform. There's a podcast where two Black millennial men get together and just figure out how to navigate what we consider life's craziest puzzle piece. And that is life itself, because we don't know what we're doing. We're just out here living the best way we know how. But we're having some of these tough conversations, right? Trying to figure it out. So feel free to follow me there personally on Instagram. You'll have all my updates of things I'm doing personally.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Broderick, what you got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on all social media platforms at my name, Broderick McBride. Also on Instagram, Broderick.McBride. And my podcast, I am a co-host, second part of the Let Out Podcast, and you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasting services.
And so for me, I am Scott Hayes _LCSW on Instagram. Also, my podcast or our podcast is at The Love Hayes on Instagram. We are available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast services. If you want to see us, we release new episodes every other Monday and are available on YouTube for you to see us, give us some feedback, all that good stuff. We just really talk about navigating life, man, and healing and wholeness as journeys that we're all just trying to navigate together. We'd love for y'all to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, wifey was holding it down, and she was like, "Look, I already got it, boo." She already was typing it out.
That's my girl right there.
Yes. So good stuff, guys. I am indebted to you for taking the time to have this conversation. This conversation is worth its weight in gold. I feel like it's worth more than gold because there was so much that was shared, and I look forward to resharing this because the conversations need to be had. I don't know. We need to do a conference or something because, like I said, y'all ain't everything. Look, there's not conferences going on, so we're gonna have to talk offline about something that.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to give you your flowers, man, just for putting this together.
Yeah.
And just the idea that I think that, and I used to give you hell when I first became
used
your friend.
to.
It was about Pearls of Esther. But I'm really passionate about, like, we will go to our separate corners and heal in private.
Yeah.
And some of these conversations are going to be things that have to be done together in order for us to, heal Black families for real. All of us have our individual work to do. So I appreciate you pulling us all together to have this conversation that can sometimes be uncomfortable. So really appreciate being here, and always will be available for, you and your conversation. I'm gonna cuss you out first, but
listen every time, every single time. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for making yourself available as always. You talk so much crap on wherever, but you say some real stuff that will have us thinking. So Josh, Broderick, as always, I always appreciate your wisdom. You know that I'm here for you guys as well. Anyway, I can lend my voice to what you're working on. Scott, the same thing. It's all love. I appreciate you guys so much. So look, they're in the comments saying we need a conference. So
let's go. Let's make it happen.
We need to make it happen.
Give the people what they want, B.
Right. When I send you the message, I want to see if you leave me on red. I'm gonna know. I'm just saying. So. All right, guys. Well, we are about to end the broadcast. Follow these guys and watch the replay. Share it with your boo thing, your uncle, your brother, your cousin, your nephew, your coworker, whoever needs some encouragement and some inspiration and just some motivation to take care of their mental health. Share it with them. So good night, y'all.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night, fam.